Okay, so Angie, I'm passing it over to you. Welcome.
All right, thank you. Thanks for having me. Welcome everyone. As Jennifer said, my name is Angie Cole, and I am the Waiver Administration Specialty SSA at the board. Not really even sure how to describe my actual role. It's a wide variety of different tasks related to assisting individuals with waivers and assisting SSAs with the waiver process and different tasks within DODD. I am also, though, the liaison with the caseworkers that work with most of the individuals that have developmental disabilities that have waivers. We have 2 JFS caseworkers that we work very closely with. And so I do a lot of communication and work with them. And that's where this topic came up as something that might be helpful to assist providers to better understand the JFS system. So please feel free to ask questions as I go along. I want this to be informal. I want it to be educational and helping to meet your needs. I do not claim to know everything about JFS, but hopefully this can at least give you a basic understanding and some possible resources. So let's go ahead and get started. Let me share my screen. All right, so Job and Family Services. The main focus is going to be on Medicaid and SNAP benefits as it relates to the individuals that we work with. And to start off with, sometimes there's confusion in regards to Medicaid and Medicare. So just want to start off a little bit about the difference between those two. And Medicaid is actually a joint federal and state assistance program. So there are federal laws that mandate that certain groups are covered throughout the United States, but states themselves will vary in the different programs that they actually offer. So it is a state, the variation between states is quite great. So if an individual moves from one state to another, they have to reapply and they have to find out what services are available in that state. So for Medicare, it's actually a federal insurance program, and it's the same throughout the United States. So that's kind of one of the big differences, is that with Medicare being federal, fully federal program, it's the same. Now, sometimes figuring out whether or not somebody has Medicare and Medicaid, or Medicare only or Medicaid only, sometimes that can be a challenge when you're first starting to work with someone. Just some kind of tips. If an individual has SSDI, oftentimes they also will have Medicare because after an individual has SSDI for 2 years, after that first month of the second year, the individual is then automatically eligible for Medicare. So that is the federal insurance program. If an individual gets SSI, then oftentimes in the state of Ohio, if an individual is eligible for SSI, they are also eligible for Medicaid. They still have to apply, but the process is much quicker if you already have SSI. So sometimes one way that can be helpful in determining which insurance or which financial program somebody has, if they get their Social Security payment on the first of the month, that is typically an SSI payment. If an individual gets a Social Security payment on the third of the month, that is typically SSDI. So those are just kind of some quick tips for trying to help figure out what somebody has.
I have a question, Angie.
Yes.
Okay. Under the Medicaid program, are there some like sub insurances where they can get like Buckeye, Care Source, Paramount? That is also under the Medicaid thing, and does that make a difference as well?
That is an option, and actually I'll talk about that in a little bit as one of the options that individuals have. So yes, that's a good question, because managed care plans have become definitely the biggest push now under the new guidelines from Job and Family Services. So I will touch on that in a little bit, but feel free, Dana, if you have more questions after I go over it, to ask. So let's talk a little bit about Medicaid eligibility, since our focus today is on Job and Family Services. When it comes to actual Medicaid eligibility, first thing is an individual has to submit an application. The application for Medicaid as well as for SNAP benefits is a form called the JFS form 7200. An individual also has to live in the state of Ohio. So if an individual, let's say an individual lives in Michigan and they're going to be moving to Ohio, they can't actually apply for their benefits until they actually live in Ohio and have an Ohio residence. So the other factors that are important when applying for Medicaid and meeting that eligibility is income limits and resource limits. When it comes to income limits, they're going to look at things like whether an individual gets SSI, SSDI, if they have any kind of wages or income. Any source of income is what they're looking at when they're talking about income limits. So once again, there's just a little statement there that if an individual has SSI, they do automatically qualify for Medicaid. Once again, they have to submit the application, but the process goes quite quickly if they have SSI. So with income limits, there is a program for if an individual's income is a little bit more than is typically allowed. And that is the share of cost or patient liability program, which let me share that screen with you. And this is a resource, and I will send out any of the resources that I pull up today. I am going to send a copy to Sarah, and she's going to send a copy of all of them out to everyone. So patient liability is what this program was called for years. Job and Family Services has now changed it to share of cost. So the letters that come out from Job and Family Services will state that an individual has a share of cost. And that share of cost, it's basically the individual's financial obligation towards their Medicaid costs. So because their income is a little bit higher than the typical allowance, this program allows them to pay a small portion of their Medicaid costs so that they're still eligible for Medicaid. It is the one instance where an individual actually would make a payment to a provider. So the share of cost or patient liability program, if an individual has that share of cost, you will receive an email from Rita Chamberlain, and she would let you know who the individual is and the amount of share of cost that that individual would owe to you as the provider. And then she will give you details on how to set that up, because you will then need to bill that individual for that amount each month, because it's that individual's way of paying a small portion of their Medicaid costs in order to be eligible for Medicaid, since they have a little bit higher income limit. And so there's more information on here about how that gets paid, where the amounts are calculated, and all that kind of information. So once again, we will send that resource to you guys. All right, let's go back here. Okay, so in regards to, that was income limits. The other aspect of eligibility is an individual's resource limits. So typically an individual's resource limit maximum is $2,000. And so that is in terms of their countable resources. So countable resources include any bank accounts. So that's checking accounts, saving accounts, any kind of bank accounts. If they have a life insurance that has a cash value, if they have cash on hand, There have been instances where sometimes providers have kept cash on hand for an individual for maybe when they would buy things or have things available. That technically still counts as a resource. If an individual has worked and they have a retirement plan or any kinds of stocks or bonds, it's any kind of resource that an individual could cash out and have money from. So that is the countable resources. That's what has to be totaling less than the $2,000 typically. Non-countable resources, but these are things that still have to be reported to Job and Family Services, but they don't count against the resource limit, are going to be things like a Medicaid trust, a stable account, an irrevocable burial trust. If an individual owns a home and they live in that home, it does not count against them. A car, those are kinds of resources that an individual can have and they won't count against them, but they still have to be reported to Job and Family Services. And then I wanted to also mention another program. So if an individual with a disability works, they might also be eligible for the Medicaid buy-in for workers program, so the MBIWD program. And that program actually allows an individual's resources to be, as of this year, it's $12,555. So let me share that information. And so this is very similar to the patient liability or share of cost resource. It gives information about who's eligible for this program, as well as where payments would get paid, and a little bit about the difference between it and the patient liability. So the key thing with the Medicaid buy-in program is that an individual has to be between the ages of 16 to 64. So the reason I mention this is we have had a number of individuals that once they reach age 65, the JFS system automatically kicks them out of this program. So it's important to know if you're working with someone who is approaching age 65 to be aware of that, because once they get to that age 65 and they would get kicked out of this program, their resources would have to go back down below that 2,000. So that's a big difference between $12,555 to $2,000. So that would be something to be working with your teams about planning for. Like if they don't have a stable account, maybe that would be a good time to set up a stable account so that that money can be safely transferred. But I mention it just because it's happened a number of times. It's just something to be mindful and to be aware of. To be eligible for the Medicaid buy-in program, an individual, it can be a minimal amount of work. I mean, it could be that they work 2 hours a week. There have even been instances where an individual has only worked every other week. But the fact is that they get some type of employment or work paycheck. So just being aware that it's not that they have to work 20 hours a week or some large number of hours to be eligible for it. The other thing would be if an individual was working and was in that program and then all of a sudden they are no longer working, they would also no longer be eligible for that program. So that would also impact the amount of resources that they're able to have. So that's eligibility, being eligible for Medicaid. So since we work with so many individuals that have Medicaid waivers, just wanted to touch a little bit on some of the factors related to that. Some things that make their cases a little bit different within the JFS system. Some Medicaid cases for individuals with waivers are based solely on the individual's income and resources, not those of any of their housemates or their family, unless they're married. If they were married, then their spouse's income and resources would have to be reported during that initial application. But if an individual is over the age of 18, whether they live with family or with roommates, their Medicaid case, if with if they have a waiver, is based solely on that individual's income and resources. Dana, you had asked or mentioned about the managed care. So individuals that have a waiver, they actually have the option. They can either have traditional Medicaid or straight Medicaid, or they can choose to go on to one of the managed care plans. Let me pull up here. This is just one of the resources that shows some of the different managed care plans. But once again, when an individual has a waiver, it is up to them. They can choose. Sometimes the system will try to automatically put them on a managed care plan, but if they have a waiver, they have the right to choose to keep straight Medicaid or to go with one of the managed care plans. The system does currently encourage the managed care plans. And I have another resource that will send out to you guys that has contacts for the different managed care plans. If an individual wants to get information about the different plans. The key thing for an individual is their doctors. Does their doctor accept which plans does their doctor accept, or does their doctor accept only straight Medicaid? So that's what an individual would want to know before choosing one of the plans or choosing whether to keep straight Medicaid, is the doctors that they go to, which plans that they accept.
I have a quick question, Angie. I'm old, so I've seen all these changes throughout the years. But I guess my question is, why is a managed care plan so important right now versus just having straight Medicaid that just takes care? In one point, straight Medicaid did everything. Now they have these managed care plans. So what is really the purpose, or why did they go to managed care plans in the first place?
Okay. And one of the resources I'll send out, Dana, will have some of that information in it. But a big part of it was that the managed care plans offer some additional resources. Like some of them have some additional benefits that straight Medicaid doesn't offer. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're better. It just means that they're different. But part of the reason that they started offering more of the managed care plans was that they were finding that sometimes individuals needed some assistance with coordinating their care. And with the managed care plan, there is a care provider. They have case manager kind of things through the care plans that assist with that. So they can assist individuals with some of, if they have certain medical needs, they can help with coordinating some of that. And so it's just an additional resource for people to have. Different plans also offer different incentives. If individuals have certain things that they participate in or certain medical things that they do, then they'll have different incentives that they'll offer. So, but it was set up with kind of the idea of an additional care coordination. And that was kind of the aspect behind it.
My other quick one, and I apologize, I don't want to take up the whole thing. Wouldn't a waiver just cover that? If they, they have a waiver, just cover everything that they need.
I mean, the waiver does not necessarily cover everything they need because it's not an actual insurance plan, whereas these are insurance plans. So this is going to be covering things related to medical appointments and that aspect of care, more of that specifics of the medical care. Now, some individuals with waivers, especially if they only have a level 1 waiver, if they had somebody assisting with appointments, etc., with a level 1 waiver, that's a minimal amount of services that they're getting through the waiver. So that additional care manager in regards to a managed care plan might be more beneficial for that individual if they need some additional assistance in that regards. If an individual has an IO waiver and maybe they have 24-hour services, then they might have staff that are doing more and along those lines in terms of, assisting with health coordination, etc. So Different waivers, individuals have different services or different amounts of services. So this is just another way that, you know, the state was trying to ensure that there weren't people falling through the gaps if they needed some additional services.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks for the questions. Okay, so the other aspect that's important if anyone works with younger individuals is in regards specifically to Medicaid as it relates to individuals with waivers. Children under 18 who live with their parents, when they apply, they have to submit their parents' income and resource information with that initial Medicaid application. And Medicaid could also require a 5-year look back at their resources. But because the individual is applying for a waiver, the parent's income and resources would not be counted. That child would still be eligible to get the waiver. But JFS has to have their income and resource information, because if for any reason that child were to no longer have a waiver, then that individual's Medicaid would be based on the parent's income and resources as well. And so that's why JFS requires that information when an individual applies, so that they have it should that child ever lose their waiver. Okay, so some other information that's helpful to be aware of if you're working with an individual who has both Medicaid and Medicare. So once again, Medicare is that federal insurance program. So it is always the primary when it comes to insurance. So if an individual has Medicare and Medicaid, Medicare is always the primary insurance. So when an individual goes to doctor's appointments, etc., and they ask about primary insurance, Medicare would always be primary, Medicaid would be secondary. But for individuals who have both, there are some programs within Medicaid that some individuals could be eligible for. And they're referred to as MPAP or Medicare Premium Assistance Programs. And the main reason I even mention this is because sometimes if you're emailing or communicating with Job and Family Services caseworkers, this might be some of the lingo that they use. So just so you have an idea of what they would be referring to. So they might say that an individual is eligible for the QMB, which is the Qualified Medicare Beneficiary Program. And that would be where their insurance, their Medicaid would pay for their Part B premiums. And that is based for individuals with low income. And it will pay all of the copays, deductibles, and co-insurance. So that would be for an individual who has Medicare and Medicaid and is considered low income in the JFS system. Those, all of those copays, deductibles, and co-insurance would be covered. If an individual has what they refer to as SLMB or Specified Low Income Medicare Beneficiary, then their Part B premiums would be paid for. For QI or Qualified Individual, that's another one where an individual, their Part B premiums would be paid for. So these are all programs where if an individual has both Medicare and Medicaid, and they have a lower income, then their Medicaid will pay for part of their Medicare premiums. And that would all be stuff that Job and Family Services would put in the letters to you. So this is more just so you have an understanding of where that comes from. So let's talk specifically about the authorized representative role. That is key, especially for providers, because many providers become authorized representatives, or they might work with families and assist with getting information that's needed. So an authorized representative is an individual. You have to be 18 or older, and In JFS's eyes, that means that you're standing in an individual's place. So you are submitting what needs to be submitted. You're ensuring information gets submitted to Job and Family Services. But for that to happen, there has to be the written statement actually authorizing the authorized rep and listing what duties that authorized rep can perform. So when an individual is designated as an authorized rep, an authorized representative will receive a copy of the notices as well as correspondence that are issued by Medicaid, because Medicaid has to send those to both the individual as well as to the authorized representative. So both would receive copies of all of the mailings that they are signed up to get. So the key is that that Job and Family Services has the authorized rep designation forms that are needed. So there's, unfortunately, at this moment in time, there's 2 different forms, and they're hoping to get it in the future changed back to 1 form, but they're still having to do some tweaking. So at this point, there's 1 authorized designation form for medical or the Medicaid, and there's 1 for SNAP benefits. And if an individual is in both programs, then unfortunately, both of them have to be completed and signed and submitted to Job and Family Services. And let me just show you real quick what they look like, especially since the 1 is a newer form, so that you can see what that looks like. If I can find it here in my... All right, here we go. This is the Designation of Authorized Rep form. This is for the medical or Medicaid program, and this is the newer form. So if you are already an authorized rep for an individual, you don't need to worry about it. But if ever you are being designated as the authorized rep for somebody new, then this form has to be completed and submitted to Job and Family Services for you to officially be the authorized rep. So the form has to be completed. And the other key factor is this section here where it says that the individual authorizes the representative to do the following. So if the first one is marked here, then they would be doing everything. The authorized rep would be assisting with everything, and you would get all mailings. The other option is if there's only specific things that they want the authorized rep to assist with, then the bottom section could be completed, and the authorized rep would only get mailings for those specific things. For most individuals, it's going to be the top box. The individual would get a copy of all of the items, and then the authorized rep would also get a copy of all of the items and mailings and such from Job and Family Services. The key here is, though, that both have to sign this form. So there's a line for the signature of the individual or guardian, if the individual has a legal guardian. And then there is a line underneath for the signature of the individual that is going to be the authorized rep. On the second page, there's also an authorization for disclosure of the PHI, the protected health information. So this also, for this part, when it talks about protected health information that may be disclosed, so that's what they would be giving permission for. Most individuals will list for all information or information related to Medicaid redetermination and SNAP benefits. Information being released is for the following purposes. Once again, that would be redeterminations. And you could also just say for Medicaid benefits. And the individual or guardian also has to sign that part of the form. The old form that we used to use, which I guess actually is here as well. Unfortunately, it's under my little bar there. Okay, so this is the old form, which used to work for both cases, but now only works in regards to SNAP benefits. And the key with this form is, once again, have to mark off which boxes for what the authorized rep is approved to assist with. The individual's information gets in there. The individual has to sign, and then the authorized reps has to sign on the bottom section, and their information has to be listed. So the key with both of them is that the individual and the authorized rep both have to sign the form. So one other thing that's important when it comes to authorized rep to be aware of is if an individual does have a legal guardian, and that legal guardian is going to be the authorized representative, then they don't actually have to fill out a designation form. Job and Family Services would just need a copy of the guardianship so that they have that on file as to the fact that the individual has a guardian. Then the guardian will automatically receive the notices, etc. So responsibilities of an authorized representative. So the big key is completing the medical or Medicaid redetermination and submitting all the required verifications by the due date. So with Job and Family Services, you'll receive, there's certain papers that come out automatically. The new Medicaid renewal form, it comes out automatically. The caseworkers don't send those out. It's just the JFS system automatically processes those and sends those out. Then if there's still further information that's needed, which most cases are going to need additional information because income and resources have to be verified every year. So then you will receive sometimes additional requests for verification, and that'll be a separate sheet, and it'll tell you what else needs to be submitted. So it's important that you're submitting everything that is requested. For SNAP benefits, there's also an interim report that comes out, and that generally comes out around 6 months from their annual time. And that's a form that you have to sign off on if there either aren't any changes, or if there are changes in terms of pay, etc., then you would need to submit that information, and the signed form also has to be submitted. And then for the SNAP benefits, there's also a recertification phone interview, which you generally get a letter about. And so it's completing that interview for the SNAP benefits. And then the other keys, which are, sorry, not sure why I hit that button. Sorry about that. So in regards to other information that should be submitted to Job and Family Services anytime are submitting changes and updates to let them know when an individual and or an authorized rep contacts information changes. So if there's an address change, a phone number change, an email change, the key things with that is if they don't have that information, then you're not going, the individual or the authorized rep aren't going to get all the letters and the renewal notices, and then it puts an individual at risk of losing their benefits. Other changes that are really important to submit are changes in income, they're changes in their countable resources and excludable resources. And it's key because those things are all things that impact the different programs that an individual is eligible for, or the amount of benefits that an individual is eligible for. So those are key things in the authorized rep's role. So let's talk a little bit more specifically about that Medicaid and medical redetermination. So it's the annual redetermination, and that's when you're submitting the verification of an individual's income and resources for that year. Oftentimes, Job and Family Services will get responses like, well, why do we have to submit this information? Or people get frustrated that they have to submit it. So remembering that it is an income and resource-based service, so you have to submit that information annually so that they can verify that an individual is still eligible for the service and for which type of service. You know, we talked about there are different programs within there in terms of, you know, if an individual has both Medicare and Medicaid programs that they might be eligible for, or the share of cost patient liability or MBIWD. So if they don't have the correct information, they can't determine which programs an individual is actually eligible for. In terms of countable resources, so when submitting an individual's bank information, or if they have life insurance that's got a cash value, any of those types of resources, if the resources are over $2,000, then Job and Family Services would let you know, and they would let you know that you need to get those resources down below the limit, and that you have to show verification of how that was appropriately done. So technically, Job and Family Services only has to give an individual 30 days to get resources within limits and to submit those verifications. So let's say maybe somebody has $2,500 in resources, and they have to get it down below 2,000. So they have to spend, let's say the team has decided that they want to spend $800 to get it safely below and give a little bit of room. Maybe the individual needs a new couch, and they have some need for some winter clothes and some other items. So there are some things that the individual is in need of. If the individual would then go purchase those items, they would get a statement from the bank that shows that their resources are below the 2,000. And they would need to submit to Job and Family Services the copy of the updated value of the bank account that shows it's below $2,000. They would also have to show copies of the receipts of what was purchased for those amounts that shows where that money went, to show that it was properly spent and not just hidden away or given to somebody inappropriately. So they have to have that verification. If an individual has a stable account and maybe they transfer $800 from a bank account to the stable account, then they would need the verification that shows the stable account, the deposit, and that the balance has gone up in there, as well as a copy of the bank account. And then sometimes annually, they might also request copies of excludable resources, like an update on the stable account balance, or if they get information about a life insurance policy, they might request verification as to whether or not it has a cash value or not. We always encourage individuals and families when they're looking at life insurance options to be mindful and aware of how they're set up. If an individual has a life insurance value that has a cash value that the individual could cash out, sometimes it's beneficial to set up an irrevocable burial trust where they actually set up with the funeral home and pick out what services they would want to pay for, and then that gets transferred to the actual funeral home instead of in the individual's name, and then it no longer counts as something that could have a cash value that they could cash out. So that's just one option. But just being aware that annually at a redetermination, they're always going to need to verify income and resources, especially countable resources. So the Medicaid renewal form, this is one of the big things that in the last year has been a change with Job and Family Services. They call it a form, not really sure why, since it's actually a packet with like 12 pages. So when that Medicaid renewal form comes out, it's actually auto-generated from the JFS system. The JFS caseworkers don't send it out themselves. The JFS system automatically sends that form out, and on that form, there will be a respond by date. So if Job and Family Services does not receive that signed form back by that respond by date, then the JFS system itself is going to start automatically ending people's Medicaid. So the key to that is an individual or their guardian, or if they have an authorized rep, must sign page 9 from that Medicaid renewal form. JFS has to receive back all the pages. Even if the pages are blank, they just have to have all of the pages with page 9 signed. And they need it by the respond by date, because it needs to be marked in their system that it was received back. If page 9 isn't signed, it won't be able to be marked off. So page 9 has to be signed. Even though the packet seems like a lot of information, a lot of it's really not relevant. You're more than welcome to fill out information on the rest of the packet, but what they have to have is they have to have the signature on page 9, and they need to have back all of the pages, even if they're blank.
Excuse me. I hate to interrupt, but I have one quick question. I'll make it really quick. With the life insurance, with the cash value, if the owner and the beneficiary is different from the insured, would that count against them as well?
It's the owner and whoever it could get paid out to, is as long as they're not the person it could get paid out to, then it could be okay.
Is it a 5-year look back with that? Like if someone was to apply and the insurance was in the insured who was getting the Medicaid benefit, and then they say, well, let's put it in a parent's name or auntie's name or something to make them the beneficiary. Is it a 5-year look back with that, or is that acceptable to do?
That's a good question. I'm not sure when they do the 5-year look back, if they look at the life insurance or not.
Okay.
I can check about that for you.
Okay.
Let me make a note here real quick.
Okay. Thank you.
5-year look back on life insurance. And once again, that's another reason that they often, look at in terms of the irrevocable burial trust, because that is something that's actually already designated for what what would need to be paid for. Because some of the different life insurance plans, sometimes families and individuals end up paying more than they're actually going to get out of those plans. And so sometimes if you have the irrevocable burial trust, one of the perks can be that it's actually already designated and set up for whatever specific costs. So you know exactly how much has to be covered. But I mean, once again, it's an individual and family's choice in terms of that. It's just something we like to be sure that they're aware of as an option. So the Medicaid renewal form and this automated JFS system, the thing right now is, because of the pandemic, the JFS system isn't automatically able to just end people's Medicaid. So thanks to the pandemic at this moment, the system won't automatically end somebody's Medicaid if they don't submit the form. But JFS is unable to approve a case until that is received. And as soon as the pandemic is over and JFS's system deems that it's over, that changes, then the system will automatically end people's Medicaid if that form is not received by the respond by date. And Job and Family Services also wanted me to be sure to share that when you get that Medicaid renewal form and you know you're going to be sending that back in, you can go ahead and submit their countable income and resources at the same time. It will help to decrease the amount of back and forth that you'll have with Job and Family Services, because you know that they're going to be asking for their countable income. They're going to be asking for, the pay stubs if an individual is working, the amount that they're getting for SSDI or SSI. And also for resources, they're going to be asking for bank statements and that kind of stuff. So they have said that it would be great if people would go ahead and send that information in when they submit the Medicaid renewal form, that it would help in the long run. You guys would get less back and forth emails and less requests for additional information. So that's just an FYI as well. In regards to SNAP benefits, which is SNAP stands for Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. And so that's what used to be called food stamps or the food assistance program. So for that program, an individual SNAP benefits get put on an Ohio direction card, one of the electronic benefits transfers. And there is, I'll show you just so you have an idea of what it looks like. I will send this resource as well. And this is just a copy of information about the Ohio Directions card. So if you're working with an individual and they have Ohio Direction cards, you can assist them if they have questions, if they ever lose their card. It tells you all kinds of information about the SNAP benefits program, but it's especially a good resource in case an individual has issues with their card or loses their card or any of that kind of stuff. So I will share that resource with you guys just so you can have it on hand in case. So for the SNAP benefits are actually based on an individual's income and their living expenses. So if somebody's applying for SNAP benefits, Job and Family Services is going to be requesting copies of their income. They're also going to request copies of an individual's lease or something that shows the amount that they're paying for their rent, as well as they will ask about utility costs. It's also important to know that the SNAP benefits is actually a separate case than an individual's Medicaid/medical case. So in JFS's system, those are two different cases. So you might get asked about the SNAP benefits at a different time than their medical or Medicaid. Generally, it's around the same time, but there are occasions where maybe somebody got SNAP benefits at a different time throughout the year, and so the two cases might be even at different times. So just so you're aware that in the JFS system, those are considered two separate cases for an individual. We talked about earlier when we were talking about Auth Rep responsibilities that there is an interim report, and that is the 6-month form that needs to be signed off and sent back in. And it's kind of the reminder if there are any kind of pay changes or any of that to update that information. It's important with SNAP to report any kind of income changes as they occur, as that can impact the amount of SNAP benefits that an individual gets. So once an individual who's 18 turns 18 and they're on a waiver, they're actually eligible for SNAP benefits based on their income and living expenses if they do not live with family. So if, let's say, they live in a waiver home with 2 housemates and they turn 18 at that point in time, they would be eligible for SNAP benefits based on their income and living expenses. If living with a family, an individual's living with a family, they would be eligible for SNAP benefits at age 22. So that's kind of the difference between those aspects. And then there's also, as we talked about earlier, the annual recertification interview for the SNAP.
If they're on a special diet and they live with family and they're 18, do they qualify for the SNAP benefits, or like if they live with their guardian, does that change the age?
I am not aware of that, but they do have some little quirks like that, so I can check on that for you if you would like. Special diet, if they're 18 and have a special diet and live with family?
Yes.
Okay. And then this is just kind of the recap of things that are really important to report to Job and Family Services. Job and Family Services has had a lot of challenges with not having accurate information. And so we're just trying to help get the word out about how we can all help the individuals that we work with to keep their benefits, since we know that their benefits are so important. You know, the Medicaid or their medical benefits, that's their insurance, but it's also for those on waivers, what pays for those waiver services, since the waivers are a Medicaid funded program. So it's important anytime an individual has changes in their income or work to report those changes. If an individual has any kind of change in address or phone number, or if the authorized rep has any kind of change in address or phone number. The JFS system, if it gets returned mail for an individual for a certain period of time, then the system itself, once again, will end somebody's Medicaid, because it assumes if they don't have accurate information to get a hold of them, they must not need benefits. So it's really important that Job and Family Services has accurate contact information for individuals. And then for authorized rep, it's really important, because if they don't have the correct information for the authorized rep, then the authorized rep won't get all the paperwork or the letters that are the requests for the needed information. If there's a change in authorized rep, so if you are start to work with a new individual, and at your team meeting, there's a discussion about you becoming the authorized rep. In order for that to actually occur, that authorized rep designation form that we talked about earlier would have to be signed and submitted to Job and Family Services. One key within an organization, so for some larger providers where maybe they have a designated staff that does the authorized rep role, if that designated staff changes, technically a new authorized rep designation form should be submitted to Job and Family Services, so they know who at that agency to be contacting. If an individual opens a Medicaid trust or a stable account, even though those aren't considered countable resources, they're still resources that Job and Family Services has to have a copy of and have records of the amounts and the information for those. And then life insurance policies or any changes to life insurance policies, being sure that that information also gets shared with Job and Family Services. So just some other important numbers I wanted to list is the Medicaid hotline number. So that's the general issues number, and for if an individual has managed Medicaid managed care plan questions, that's the number. And then the Ohio Direction Card, their customer service number. And then occasionally, if you're working with an individual and they or the family have maybe requested, or they or the guardian have done anything in terms of requesting a state hearing or anything in that regards, there's the contact information for that as well. Does anybody have any questions? You know, when talking with Job and Family Services about doing this presentation, they really wanted me to, you know, emphasize how important your role is in assisting individuals with getting and keeping benefits. And if you do have questions that arise or that come up, you know, to feel free to reach out. We want to work together and assist as we can, so to feel free to reach out. Besides the two JFS caseworkers that we currently work with, Penny Wilson and Angela Amstutz, there are some individuals that do have other JFS caseworkers. especially if at one point in time they were in a different type of long-term care facility, like maybe a developmental center or ICF or nursing facility, then they might have a different caseworker. But we can still assist in working with JFS if you've got questions or concerns. So please feel free to reach out at any time if you have questions or concerns.
Angie, can you put that numbers back up real quick so I could just take
Sure.
a picture, snapshot of it?
Does anybody else have any questions?
Yeah, Angie, I had set up a trust a long time ago, and I had included an amendment in my trust for my son. Since I'm his independent provider, and that allowed me to put some funds away for him in the event that he would need to buy medical equipment or something, or remodel his room or whatever. Do I need to let you know that? Plus, he's got a life insurance that has been assigned to me for years, but you guys keep insisting on knowing the cash value in that.
So they're asking every year for a copy
What
of
do
the
I
life
do?
insurance, but it's payable to you.
It's payable to me. I've been paying the premiums on it.
Okay,
I
so
sold it to him, and I bought that when he was born, the day he was born, because I was an insurance agent at the time. Didn't know he had health complications at the time either.
okay. Eugene, let me give you my contact information.
Okay.
And I can help look into that for you. My phone
All
number
right.
is 419-380-5171.
All right, Angie. When's a good time to usually give you a call?
That varies greatly, but I would say, like, if you want to do it in the next couple days, tomorrow after noon, I think I'm pretty open. And then early next week, I would say, I think I have something Monday morning and Monday afternoon, so maybe middle of the day more on Monday.
I understand. Might even be better if you just give me a call.
That could be, I could do that as well. I just didn't want to make you have to share personal information over the Zoom, which actually we probably could end the recording part since the official presentation is over, but